All right, what's up, everyone? Thanks so much for being here. I'm excited to do this. I'm very happy right now, as you can tell, because I hit the live button and I got no error. Yesterday, I got a server reject error, which is terrifying, right? I was thinking about this the other day, and it's like Jurassic Park when Samuel L. Jackson is about to push the button. Like every time I go live, this is like behind the scenes things. Every time people go live, like right before you hit the live button, it's like every single time without fail, it's like, is this going to work? Like, I really hope this works. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But like, it's really funny because like the anxiety to like push the live button, it's through the roof. I'll tell you that much. Anyway, thank you all so much for being here. And I'm super excited about today's topic, how to practice jazz. I'm going to get into this. I'm going to get into practicing all areas of jazz, and it's going to be really, really fun. And I'm going to start with improv. I'm going to go over voicings. I'm going to go over tunes. And again, if you guys are new to the live streams, if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask them. They can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about practicing jazz. I will answer it, but I'll try and relate it back to practicing jazz because we all want to learn. And practicing is a great way to do that and progress our skills, right? Again, if you are new, if you're not a member of Jazz Piano School or you're just on here for the first time, this is open to the public. Usually I do live podcasts. I haven't done those in a while. I've just been doing them by myself. But if you are new, again, just use the chat. My name is Brendan Lowe, creator and founder of Jazz Piano School. I'm doing this 4-part live stream series that's happening in between a video lecture series, and essentially these live streams are relating back to the episodes. Meaning I did a live stream 2 days ago that related to episode number 1. Today's live stream is number 2 relating to episode 2. Okay, does that make sense? So each of the live streams is relating to essentially topics regarding the mini-series and episodes that I'm dropping and releasing. And essentially, we are now in practice mode. And so we're going to be going over, last live lesson, we went over theoretical things, like how to learn jazz, how to get better at jazz. Today, we're going to be going over practicing, so essentially the technique portion. And so my system, my philosophy that I've created regarding theory, sequence, and members will know this. They'll see a lot of different blocks, right? Theory, technique, improvisation, and repertoire. And they're different colored blocks. And essentially, I don't want to say I stole them, but I borrowed them from these language learning educational skills that my French teacher had taught me and was, letting me know, like, hey, this is how you learn a language. This is how you teach French. Or she said, this is how I teach French. And I was like, wow, interesting. And I kind of built my system off of that. And again, it's what really helped me excel at jazz piano finally after a long time. Anyway, let's get into this. The thing I want you, before I go to the piano, the thing I want you to ask yourself about practicing jazz. A lot of us just go to the piano, we start playing, right? We don't really know what to practice, or we'll be playing lines, we'll be reading transcriptions, right? Reading notes on the page and reading voicings or practicing voicings. I really want you to ask yourself, what does it mean to practice? Like, what does it mean when you're practicing? And I truly believe that all of you should have a very clear concept of what it means to practice. And if you don't, right, then you're probably not making much progress, unfortunately, and it's probably just a waste of time. Sorry. So anyway, we want to have a clear concept of what practice is, right? And how we actually utilize our time to make progress in jazz. Because as I always say, jazz is very nebulous. It can feel like you're making progress, but you're really not doing much of anything at all. Okay? So here's what I want you to ask yourself. When you are practicing, are you learning the concept? And what I mean by that is, are you practicing the concept? Are you practicing the concept? Are you practicing a concept that you're trying to learn? Now, there's different variations of this, right? And some of you may say yes, some of you may say no. I'm going to go to the piano in 2 seconds, I swear. And if you're playing a line, you could be practicing a concept or you could be practicing that line. Now, you may be practicing for technical facility. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the increasing your facility for your fingers, right? I'm talking about actually practicing concepts so that you can start to put more tools in your jazz piano tool bag. Okay? And so that comes with an understanding of the concept. Now, here's a great way to test yourself. All right? Anything you're practicing, you should be able to do without music. For the most part, 97%, right? I'm not talking about transcriptions or anything like that. I'm talking about, well, I am talking about transcriptions. I'm going to get to that in a second. But all the concepts that you're learning, whether it be improvisation concepts, voicing concepts, solo piano concepts, comping concepts, blues, ballads, rhythms, any concept you learn, if you've learned the concept, you should be able to practice it without music. And a lot of us get handcuffed to the music and we never really fully understood the concept. Okay? Let's go to the piano. So let's start with an improvisational line. Okay? I know we all love improvisation. I love improvisation too. If I were to play, I'm going to make a line up here. If I were to play a line over a 2-5-1 in B flat, let's go with. Okay, 2-5-1 in B flat. And let's say the line was. Let's say that was the line, right? What did I play? Right? Or maybe my hands are so cold. It's freezing in my house right now. Okay. Let's say it was even more advanced than that, right? You have all these different sorts of trills. You have all these different movements, right? If you are reading this line verbatim, right, and working on it, because that's how, let's be honest, that's how most of us practice improvisation. I mean, I know I did for like many, many years. I was reading Oscar Peterson licks and lines and transcriptions for I don't even know how many years to come. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I was playing, but I knew it sounded good because when I played what he was playing, I was like, oh, I finally sound good, right? Woo! So let's say that's the line you're practicing. My point here is, and I want you to hold this within the entire structure of this lesson that I'm about to teach you, is what are the concepts happening behind this improvisation line? I want you all to strive to understand the concepts of the line and the Lego building blocks that go into it instead of just reading music and practicing improvisation lines. And I'm going to get more into the step-by-step system of practicing improvisation, but hopefully some of you can break this down in bite-sized pieces so that you understand the Lego building blocks that go into this line. Many of you may not be able to, but let's check it out. I'm going to remove the musicality and textures, what I call musicality and textures in my improvisation playbook and other areas of jazz piano school, which means the trills. So right now I'm going. That's an ornamental trill that spices up the line. Right? That's a very slow version of it. So it sounds like this, sped up. It sounds much more like, ornamenty than just doing this. Right? That's just pure eighth notes. So the ornaments I'm going to remove out of the whole line. And so I put in 3 of them when I advance my playing. So I put another one in here. Right? So I'm going to remove that. And then before I put an ornament here, I'm going to remove that. Right? Now, even with the removal of all these ornaments, there's still a heavy amount of educational concepts happening in this particular line. Now, if you're able to learn them and understand them, my whole philosophy is you're going to be able to implement them in your playing with the understanding that you can execute them in your playing without music. Thus, spontaneous freedom to improvise in this way. That's our goal, right? So this contains this line. If we check it out, it contains a lot of bebop approaches, and you guys can test yourself right now. Just say to yourself, well, what's happening in this line? Play it. If you're at a piano, play it yourself. I'll go slow. The main foundational concept behind this is bebop approaches. Right? That's really the construct that's upholding this line. Okay, so you should understand the bebop approaches. Yep, they're called enclosures. They're called a lot of things. I like to refer to them as bebop approach notes. And enclosures, yep, great. A lot of people are saying I hear enclosures, chord tones, passing tones, altered tones, yes. So we're going to get into all of that. So let's just check out the enclosures, or I like to call them bebop approach notes. You can call them whatever you want. Doesn't matter. Right here, you should always start to look again at your, especially in improvisation, look at your anchors. What are the anchor points? And I teach this heavily in my improvisation education, is that all of jazz is really focusing on chord tones. It's always focusing on chord tones. So you want to find the chord tone that is the target, right? So in this first area, our chord tone that we're moving to is the third. Okay, so that's going to be the highlighted area. That's like nirvana right there, right? You know, we're trying to get to that third. The way we're getting there is through a bebop approach. Now, there's lots of different types of bebop approach. This is a very advanced bebop approach, meaning there's half step below approaches, there's chord scale above approaches, right? And then what's happening here, we're honestly doing this whole movement, which actually Oscar loves these bebop types of approaches. And you'll find that different variations, like some people don't play a lot of these, right? Wynton Kelly, Red Garland, they don't use a lot of these approaches actually. And so we're sliding into that half step below, okay? I wouldn't really, this is essentially almost a double chromatic half step below, right? So you're just approaching the half step below chromatic, just essentially a double chromatic. So instead of just doing this, you're going, right? You're going up to the chord scale above here, half step above, half step below to the third. So that's a heavily weighed down bebop approach, meaning you should, you know, that is a concept in itself. If you want to implement this particular approach in your playing, like this line, right, you're going to need to isolate that and then practice it. Practice it to your minor thirds throughout your voicings. That way, when it comes time to play it, you can execute on it. Each key is going to be different with different fingerings, right? So again, we're sliding in to the 9. Okay, etc. If you want to be able to use that concept, that's a concept right there. Then the practice needed for that, to spontaneously execute that, is for you to be able to achieve a high level of comfort in all your minor keys. Does that make sense, right? So when you're learning lines or when you're working on improvisation, try to strive to understand the individual concepts and building blocks of the line, rather than just playing the line verbatim and then hoping that it's going to come and interject into your playing, because I guarantee it's not going to work like that, right? And this process is going to give you much more spontaneous freedom that you've ever had before, I promise you. Let's continue up. So from here, all that's happening here is diatonic movement, diatonic scalar movement, right? Now our next approach is going to be to this A natural. Right? And that's when the chord is going to switch to this F7. Now, the approach that's happening here is more of a simple one. We have chord scale below, chord scale above, half step below. This is a different type of bebop approach than this one, than we started with. So, like I said, again, if you want to get comfortable at executing and implementing this concept into your playing, right, you want to learn what this particular concept is. And like I said before, remember, after learning it, you should be able to remove your music. You should be able to have no music in front of you. Even if you're a Jazz Piano School member and you have all the practice exercises, the 3,000 plus practice exercises that are in Jazz Piano School and all the bebop approaches, you should be able to practice this stuff without those practice exercises because you know it. You've learned it, right? Right? This is a very common one to dominant approaches. So you should be able to sit at your piano and understand that the 9 of your dominant is happening, the chord scale above, back to the 9, or chord scale below. You can think of it either way. Half step below, into your approach, right? And then you should be able to go through your keys. You shouldn't need music for this. You know, and I hear so many people like, oh, can I get the music for this? Can I get the music? That's okay. But your goal is to learn the concept. You can use the music to learn the concept, but then again, ultimately we're trying to remove the music to play jazz, to spontaneously create music. So practicing these concepts, I highly recommend and encourage you to learn them and then practice them without music. Just look at the keyboard, right? And just go through all the keys and, you know, start to work on that concept. Let's continue. This is just an arpeggiation of chord tones. This is all arpeggiation of chord tones. So I'm going 3, 5, 7, 1. And then here, this is just a little bebop approach, right? Back to the 1. So remember, if you're a Jazz Piano School member, your bebop improvisation equation is a great mini course, and it's going to teach you that bebop approaches can happen in the middle, the beginning, the middle, and the end. And like, so essentially not always right in the middle, but they can happen like between the beginning of the line, the end of the line, and somewhere in the middle of the line, right? So this happens to be one of those in the middle of the line. And then finally here, so after this bebop approach, again, that's another concept right there. Finally, we resolve to the 3rd of the B flat major 7 chord. Right? And so now, this is the, guess what? Check this out, okay? This is the same exact approach as the one we use over here. Right? This one right here. Chord scale above, chord scale below, half step below, target note, the 3rd of our B flat major 7. And then we get into another one, right? So essentially this is more like whole step below, which slide, again, this is a double chromatic, which slides into the half step below, chord scale above, chord scale above, half step below. Now this, what is this? This is the same exact approach that we used in the beginning, but it's being used over a major 7 chord. You see that? So if you work on this one bebop approach, you can start to use it in other areas of your improvisation. And you can use it over the major. Right? Really cool. And so that ends the line. Now, you know, a lot of people you can analyze things in a lot of different ways. And I saw some people write, you know, altered scale, passing notes. You can obviously view this as the flat 9. Right? I wouldn't, some lines utilize extensions in a different way that don't have a regard for bebop approach notes. Meaning if I were to do a scalar motion, that didn't really have any bebop concepts in it. It was more like altered and extension based concepts. Right? So this is more of my half whole scale. Arpeggiation of the chord tones. So just improv of the chord tones. I forget what I played, but essentially the tools are different. The concepts are different in that line compared to this. That is a classic bebop approach conceptual move, right? And again, if we're looking to implement this into our improv, then these concepts, you have to be aware of them when you're reading music, when you're reading, transcriptions of pros and anyone teaching you, or even if just your teacher is teaching you a line, right? Or if you're reading lines or learning lines off the internet, whatever it is, you should be able to take that line, conceptually break it down, and understand the parts of what do you need to learn here. Like what are the building blocks, the educational building blocks that go into this? And when you do that, I guarantee your progress is going to make a drastic upward turn because you're learning the concepts instead of just playing lines. Now, this is all dealing with improvisational concepts, right? So let me check out some of these comments here. So these enclosures, approach notes, etc., will clear up a lot of the chromaticism in lead lines and maybe make transcription easier. Absolutely, absolutely. DP in the new ear training, I'm releasing an ear training playbook with all of our playbooks that are going to be released on Black Friday inside of Jazz Piano School for members. If you guys are not on the email list, go to jazzpianoschool.com/Black Friday 2021. If you're a member, you don't need to worry about that. Don't even bother with that, but lost my train of thought. Yes, so the ear training playbook, focuses on if your education is moving up higher, your ear is going to get higher, and your transcription access and availability is going to get higher as well. Like if you understand the concepts I'm teaching right now, right, and then you go to listen to a tune, and you're like, oh yeah, that's that Bebop Approach I've been practicing, Or that's that movement I've been practicing, or that's that whole scale, right? Or that's the whole tone scale. So you start to understand the concepts, and as you're transcribing, you're like, oh, I know exactly what that is. Now, in my ear training playbook, I go on to say that no matter what, like even me, I can transcribe pretty well based off of just hearing it, but there's fast stuff out there, right? If they're, Oscar's playing, solos that are highly moving, like I can hear the movements, but I'm going to need to slow that down. Everyone's going to need to slow it down. But yes, DP, absolutely. The more you understand the conceptual ideas and the building blocks of improvisational lines, your transcriptions and is going to get way better. Ed says, my thought is that the Bebop approach allows the listener to hang onto the line, but it's important to highlight the keynotes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So again, your chord tones are going to be the main anchors to the line of the movement, but your bebop approaches, right, are giving you tension and release. Tension and release, right? So our tension and release to the chord tone. No tension here. This is just a diatonic movement. Tension, release. Diatonic movement. And this is actually a delayed resolution because the downbeat falls on this G. Right, so tension and release. So let's go into another area of practicing jazz, right? That was a great kind of section on transcription, focused transcription. But let's say you're learning, so let's say you are working on a concept, right? The goal, like I keep saying, is for yourself to really understand the concept. So let's take a scale. A lot of people, they learn scales, but they don't really know how to use them. Thanks, Nemu. That's so awesome to hear. Thanks for writing that. Howard, we'll talk about, do you use Phrygian scale? Do you play, it's hard for me to read off the bat, 3 minor 7, flat 9, flat 13 instead of normal Dorian harmony over the 3. Do you play we'll get to that in a second. So, lost my train of thought again. Okay. Yes, improvisational concepts. So tools, in my improvisation playbook, essentially, I'm really emphasizing chord tones first to solo with. That's a concept in itself, just soloing with with chord tones. If I were to solo over Autumn Leaves with chord tones, That was all chord tones. That was literally a solo purely made up of chord tones. Everyone should be able to do that. And so your practice would be around utilizing the chord tone concept. And I've seen intermediate, advanced players not be able to do what I just did, although they can play and sound great. They are playing gigs, but like that just basic exercise of utilizing chord tones is very difficult for them. Chord tones are like your foundation to improvisation. I'm going off on an improvisation lesson here, but I don't mean to. So practicing the concepts of this, right? First, you want to develop a relationship with that, whatever concept or tool. I like to use the word tool too, because I use the analogy of building, like putting tools into your jazz tool bag. Let's say you were practicing your half whole scale. This is another tool, and a lot of people struggle with taking tools and actually working them into their improvisation, right? I hear so many students say, well, why do I need to learn my modes? What's the purpose of modes? What's the purpose of scales? How do you turn scales into improv, right? Practicing new tools has a step-by-step process, and here it is. When you first learn a new tool, let's say you're first learning the half whole scale, we want to take the elements of this tool and start to use them in our improv so they can sound natural and flowing. Right? Like that. So I finish my line off with the half whole scale. Oh, what did I play? No. Something like that. I don't even remember what I played. Something like that. Anyway, you get the point. So that was more natural and flowing. I could have changed it up. But when learning how to do this, my first step is to get a relationship going with this tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to learn my concept. And again, the theme here for practicing jazz is learning the concept. I should know and be able to feel what is happening in my half whole scale. So I should know the elements of this scale, meaning what degrees are being changed here, right? And you can relate this to any scale you want. It doesn't matter. Like if you're basing this off a major scale, we have sharp 1, sharp 2, or you can call this flat 2, flat 3. It's completely up to you. We have natural 3, flat 5 or sharp 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 1. That's based off of a major scale, right? If I were to base this off a Dorian scale, right, then you'd have sharp 1 or flat 2, natural 3, right? But again, that's not really important. I usually use a major scale, or especially for dominant chord tools, I'll use a Mixolydian scale because that's our normal mode that's being played for that particular type of chord, right? So if we take our Mixolydian mode and base our half whole off of that, we have flat 2, flat 3, 3, flat 5, natural 5, 6, regular 7, flat 7, you can call it 1. Now that I know it, like I understand the conceptual things of this scale. It's in my brain. I don't need to use the music anymore. I can pull my music away. I can start to practice this scale, excuse me, and get used to it. Just get comfortable with it. And I'm just practicing in one key right now. This what I'm saying here goes for any tool you're trying to learn. For any concept you're trying to learn, this is what I do. I do this to this day. I'm just going to go up and down the scale and utilize I'm just going to play it until I get comfortable. And actually, this is ear training in itself. Your ear is getting used to the different varying degrees of the like half steps and whole steps and how it sounds based over your left hand dominant chord. Now, intermediate and advanced players, you guys can do more than this. Like I'll do this. Right? Do whatever you want. Like make the exercises fun for yourself. It doesn't have to be, mundane and boring all the time, right? And again, all I'm doing here is developing a relationship with my tool, with my concept that I'm trying to implement into my brain so it can come out spontaneously in my playing. Next thing I'll do is I'll take the different parts of the tool or of our concept, and in this case, scales. Like, you have so many scales in jazz, right? How do we actually start to implement them into our playing and use them in a melodic way, right? This is the process I use and teach as well, obviously. So let's go with the beginning of the scale. Now all I'm going to do is just go up and down in this motion, and I'm going to start to use those notes as improvisational notes. So I'm just going to go up and down. Out of time, I'm not going to do anything here. I'm starting to improvise out of time, but with no pressure, no metronome, no changes. I'm just hearing the notes. I'm just building a relationship with this first part of my tool. Okay, I'm comfortable with this, right? Let's add a little pressure. I'm going to start to improvise like with a metronome or with some sort of pulse, with the conceptual idea that I'm improvising with these notes here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Get as advanced as you want, or for a beginner, get as basic as you want. It doesn't matter. You're still going to be developing a relationship with this part of the scale. Again, your left hand, if you have a more advanced left hand, you can do more. And spend like 10 minutes there, right? Okay, you got the idea. Go to the next section, and you're going to implement the same system. Now, the important thing to know here is by doing this, you're actually removing the scalar notion or concepts that we all start to get ingrained in our head. Like, oh, it's just a scale. It's just a scale. It's not just a scale, right? The scale contains different relational values and sounds. The more you experiment and explore using this kind of systematic pattern, the better you're going to be with this particular scale. Again, that's a more advanced approach. You can go slower as well. Finally, till you open up the whole concept of this particular tool, right? And again, this tool goes for any tools. It goes for voicings. It goes for reharms. Right? It goes for pentatonic scales. I do the same process when practicing every single thing of jazz. Like, the process never changes, right? The goal is always to learn the concept, develop a relationship with that concept, remove the music from your stand so that you understand the concept. It's like your test, right? Do you understand what you're practicing, the tool? Remove the music and start to really open it up. So finally, back to the half whole scale. I have my whole half whole scale. Now I'm experimenting with my whole half whole scale. I'm staying within one register, and these confines actually help you get better. Like, after you've worked on one register, go to 2 registers. Woo, I made a mistake. And then you apply some pressure, you apply some time, right? So you start to apply time to your practice. Let's go slower. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now Now, again, all I'm doing is just utilizing the scale. I'm just going up and down with the different movements and approaches, like with the scale. There's no bebop approaches. I shouldn't have said approaches. If you find yourself doing something over and over and over again, try and break out of the box. Try not to do that. You're always trying to explore and break out of the box and switch it up, right? All right, you get it. The next portion, we've just been working on this tool with one chord. We want to start to practice this in a more situational basis. And I talked about this in the first live stream. If you haven't checked it out, definitely go to our YouTube channel and check that out. Excuse me. And I talk about utilizing game-like scenarios, like baseball players practice hitting outside the game so that they can hit in a game. You know, golf players they practice outside of a golf round so that they can hit in the golf round. You want to mimic your game time scenario, your playing scenario. So start to play some progressions now with the use of your tool. So I'll play over my G minor. Keep it super basic, whatever works for you. If you can only play root position chords, do that. Now I'm going to switch to my half whole tool. Right? And I'm slowly starting to implement it into game-like scenarios. And by game-like, I mean tune-like scenarios. You guys got to remember, 2-5-1s and 5-1s are essentially the 99% of jazz. You know, so if you can practice this stuff over 2-5-1s, when you get to tunes, it's going to be a piece of cake because most tunes just are 2-5-1s or 5-1s, right? Relationships like that. So now I'm starting to implement my tool. And again, no matter what level you're at, you can do this. Okay, that's a more basic version. If you're a more intermediate to advanced player, you can use some rootless voicing, some left-hand solo piano components, right? You can go to your 6th chord to have a little bit of a turnaround. So you're really starting to implement that tool you've been working on because you've learned the concept, because you've developed a relationship, you spent time with it in different areas of it. It now starts to morph itself into improvisation and into your playing without having it just be a scale. Do you see that? It's really important because it's going to unlock a lot of doors for you. Let's move to voicings for a second, okay? So voicings, or maybe let's go to some two-hand voicing arrangements, kind of solo piano style. And if anyone has questions too, or anything you're looking to practice or implement, please let me know in the comments below. So let's say you're playing, what was the tune I was demonstrating with? Beautiful Love. To play and practice things, like, again, you need to understand the concept. So try not to just sit down and play tunes like how you know how to play them. Try and take a concept that you want to implement and work on that concept so you can have the goal of implementing that concept into a tune rather than just kind of playing what you know. I mean, that is always fun, right? So let's say my concept here is I want to create spread voicings in my solo piano arrangements. Something like this, right? So again, how would we even go about practicing this? Right? These big spread lush chords. Like how can we go about practicing this? Right? It's a really hard thing because most of us, and I had no idea for years, I wasn't being taught how to do this. My teacher, again, would show me this stuff or give me music of what I just played. I could give you music of what I just played, right? Or you can transcribe it. Sorry. I think I did this. Let's put a 5 in there. But the transcription process is great for sure, but it still doesn't teach you what conceptual things are happening for you to then later go and practice and put into your playing. So the way the practice process would work is you would transcribe this and you would have the music for it, and then you would play it. And that would be considered practicing. Like you're practicing my arrangement of Beautiful Love without really understanding what I'm doing or why I am doing things. And that doesn't really lead anywhere. It doesn't really lead to you getting better. It just leads to you being able to play transcriptions of things. Now, is it fun? Of course. Because you can instantly sound better by playing someone else's transcription, right? And so let's look at the concept real quick here. Sorry. So right here, if I break this down, I'm using a very simple two-hand voicing approach to harmonizing my melody. So my melody's here. I'm going to be harmonizing on the downbeat. I'm going to be playing a spread of my bass note and shells. Now, when you create two-hand voicing spreads, it's very important to realize that there's really only 3 different structures you can use to create two-hand voicing spreads. I bet you've never been told that before. It's very simple. You can use 1 and 7, you can use 1 and 3, or you can use a variation of 1 and 10 or 1, 7 and 10. I like to call that structure 3. 1, 7, 10, or just 1 and 10. I'll say it again. 1 and 7, 1 and 3, or 1 in 10, or 1, 7 and 10. So for structure 3, it's like variation A and B. Variation A is 1 and 10. 1, 7 and 10 is variation B. Now, if you can't hit this, just roll it or jump like this. All two-hand voicings are essentially going to be a variation of those 3 structures. I chose structure 3. I went 1 and 10. Anytime you have a two-hand voicing, you need to pick up the other shell in your other hand. If one shell is missing, your right hand has to pick up that shell, or your left hand has to play it. And the only time it can play it is in a spread like this, or like 1, 3, and 7. Right? I don't really consider this one of the structures because it's not really creating a two-hand voicing spread. That's why I left it out. But this is a way to cover bass note and shells. But I'm just going to talk about this for now. So this is structure 3. My right hand's going to... This is an E minor 7 flat 5 chord I'm building, by the way. I'm so sorry. So here's our E minor 7 flat 5. And again, in flat 5 chords... So here's our missing shell, but we do have to pick up the flat 5. Once we have the flat 5 in there, anything can happen. But we do know we have the melody note is A up here. So already I've created a pretty thick arrangement style without any extensions or anything else like that. Right? But I did add one note. I added my F sharp. This is a natural 9 over your minor 7 flat 5 chord. I could have doubled the 3rd up here too. That sounds nice. I could have doubled the root. That sounds cool too. I like both of those, right? So the system or the concept here that you would want to work on to increase your two-hand voicing spread arrangements in your solo piano playing to accomplish what I am doing, that is going to be your practice. That's how you're going to practice. You're going to practice the concept of two-hand voicing spreads, right? And in this case, you'd want to practice 1 and 10. Now, for a lot of you, you probably can't reach that. Let's go to a more simple one. Let's say 1 and 7, right? Let's say you were to practice this spread, let's say over a G7 chord, and you wanted to create, let's say your melody note was A, that's on If I Were a Bell, the melody note's A. Let's say you want to create a spread like this, you can put the 13 in here. Right? You want to practice the underlying foundational concept, meaning 1, 7, 3. You want to be able to do this for all chords and all keys, essentially, so that when you get to your tune, you can harmonize So if we look at this, if I take out the melody and I take out the chord tone, at the root of this we have bass note and shells. Right? And then I'm adding chord tones and extensions. That's the final step. So here, If we take out the melody, we take out my extension, we take out, and this is the 4. I'm making it a sus chord, so it's essentially a reharm to the dominant. But here's my dominant, 1, 7, 3. Let's remove the melody. Let's remove my extension, my color. Now we have, again, the basis of my 2-hand voicing spread is always, it's one of those structures all the time. So that's the concept you'd want to work on in order to accomplish what I'm playing. And again, once you are able to do that, once you can practice that concept through the keys and make it your own, and you are comfortable doing that, then these spreads become very easy for you. And I use easy as a loose term because obviously it's a lot of work that goes into it. It's not easy to practice this structure in all keys for all chords, right? This is for dominant 7. You would need to do it for minor 7. Minor, right? And then do it for major, 1, 7. That needs to be completely natural. So that's not an easy process. Is it easy in your mind? Yes. In knowing the concept is half the battle. So when you know what's happening and you understand it, your progress is going to drastically increase. Rather than me giving you the transcription of me playing If I Were a Bell and you playing what I'm playing, right? All right. I think you get what I'm trying to say. So, depending upon what you're working on, and this holds true for anything, for any concept, like anything. Like I want you to ask yourself from here on out, going forward, when you are, like let's say there's a sound you're looking for, a specific sound. I need some water real quick. And I do this to this day for albums, you know. When I hear a sound or a concept I like, well, not the concept, I should say, a sound. Like when something hits my ear, I'm like, oh, that's killing, right? That was swinging. I listen back to it. I do transcribe it. Like if I can't hear it off the bat and if I can't play what's being played, I do transcribe it. And then I look at it and I ask myself, what is the concept that's being used here? And I guarantee 99% of the time, there are educational components upholding what is being played. Rarely do improvisation solos and things happen in jazz, right? Contrary to belief that like it's all just spontaneous and random stuff. If I were to play random stuff, it would sound like this. That's random. It's not random when people are taking solos or someone is playing chords or voicings. Like that isn't random. Voicings aren't random. They're practice educational components, right? So I ask myself, what's happening here? What's the concept? And if you don't know, ask someone, ask a teacher, try and find out. And if you want to implement that into your playing, that's what you're going to need to practice, right? And your different goals in your past, there are going to be lots of different paths. So you need to pick one. You can't just learn it all at once either, right? And that's the great thing about these playbooks in jazz piano school in general is that you're moving and increasing the meters and levers. I said this in the first live lesson, but some people's improvisation path is very strong, meaning your improvisational abilities are very strong, but your voicing abilities are not strong, or your solo piano arranging abilities are not strong, right? Or you can play solo piano. You can play gorgeous solo piano. You know, and then when I've heard this, I swear, I'm not BSing you right now. I hear the strangest and the funniest things after running jazz piano school for about 7 years now and teaching thousands of students. A student would come to me, or within jazz piano school, they'd come and they can play any tune like that. Gorgeous. I'm like, oh my God. And then I'm like, okay, let's solo, right? And they go to solo and it's not happening at all, right? So think about where you're at. Like, what do you need? What do you need to work on? What do you need to practice? What concepts do you need? Like, where are you lacking? Because jazz piano, it's not just a big ball of stuff, right? I really try and break down the concepts. Like, this is what the playbooks that I'm releasing are all about, is that all these concepts have paths to them. Different paths, right? So if you want to improve your improvisation ability, that's a path. And there's other paths within that path, like improving your blues improvisation. That's much different than playing modern improv. That's a whole different path. It's a whole different ball game, right? So you can't just learn it all. Really try and break down the conceptual idea, focus on what your goal is, and then move toward that. Now, again, if you're doing it by yourself, it's quite difficult for the student, like you, realizing what you need and what concepts you need, obviously. But if you do have a teacher right now, or you are, subscribed to some sort of website, or hopefully you're a member of Jazz Piano School, then you can start to move down these paths and really get good at individual concepts and really up those meters of your ability meters, right? Your solo piano meter, your blues meter, your comping meter, your voicing meter, so that you're understanding the concepts and you're understanding exactly what you need to practice in order to get better. All right, so let me tackle some of these questions real quick, and then I'm kind of hungry. So that was the lesson for today. Again, just if you want to rewatch any of this, it's online on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, the Jazz Piano School YouTube channel. You can go back through a lot of nuggets in what I said today. All right. Let me see. Howard, do you use the Phrygian scale? Do you use the Phrygian scale? Do you play? I think these are all individual questions. Instead of normal Dorian harmony over three minor 7, I see. So this is a more modal question, which is great. This is great. This is a great question. So if we look at our modes, something real quick to understand is that modes or scales, they all have colors, right? This is a very cool way to think about your scales. Instead of saying the word scales is kind of like, it makes a lot of us cringe. It makes me cringe because I think of my classical teacher like drilling my scales. But all of our scales have colors, right? And that's because the intervallic relationships between all the notes are different. So if I play an Ionian mode, right? No one wants to hear that word. It's just a major scale. Now, if we check out the whole steps and half steps to this, whole step, half step. I only need to go that far to demonstrate. If I now play my Dorian mode, starting on C, right? Whole step, half step. So already we have a new color. We have a new color in our mode, right? Before we had whole step, half step. Dorian mode has whole step, half step. Let's check out Phrygian, right, Howard? So this will be kind of in relation to your question. The Phrygian scale is going to have different colors too, right? But check this out. The Phrygian scale can be used over C minor just like the Dorian scale can be, but it's going to produce a different sound in color because of the relationship in the intervallic relationship between the notes and the whole steps that build the scale. So here's Ionian. We have 2 whole steps. I'm not going through the whole scale. It would take too long to demonstrate, but whole step, half step now for Dorian. Check out Phrygian. Here's going to be Phrygian. Right? And so actually you might be asking about this, or maybe you're asking about the flat 9 in the Phrygian scale over a minor chord. Right? You could be asking about that. Or sus flat 9, flat 13. Right? The sus flat 9, flat 13. So anyway, back to this. My color, my flat 9 here is a color. That's a color in my Phrygian scale. And if I were playing Phrygian over a C minor, that would be an optional choice of mine to relinquish that color. I don't know if relinquish is the right word. To bring out that color, like to let it come out. Like a Phrygian sound here is gorgeous. It's very gorgeous. But a lot of people or students will play the scale and hear that note and be like, that doesn't sound good. That doesn't sound that great, right? But check it out. If I were to do something like this, that's a much different thing, right? Than just playing, right? So and again, this actually leads back to developing a relationship with the tool. You have to do. I really don't believe in any avoid notes, with exceptions, right? A C7 can have a 4 in it, absolutely. I actually love combining them. So you have a voicing like this. Put both of them together and it's a gorgeous sound. It's very dreamy, explory, mystical, childlike. Right? So there's not really avoid notes. I mean, there is technically and traditionally taught, like obviously the Mark Levine books and things like that. I will teach and educate in traditional ways, but again, like I said, it's all about how you develop a relationship with your tool. And if you use the system that I actually taught today, your ear will be getting trained in the process, you know? So that will fix a lot of the stuff, the avoid note, because when you just play it, it doesn't sound good. Like this just doesn't sound good to me. That just doesn't sound like an appealing scale. But over time, after developing my relationship with the scale, like it's, you know, now I can hear it. I can hear the colors that can come out in the scale. I have a different relationship with it than when I first started. All right. Bruce, Ed, any recommendations for people that tend to jump into advanced techniques before they're ready? So here's my thing with jumping ahead. It's okay to jump ahead. Like we all want to jump ahead. I get it. I wanted to as well. And the concept I use and the analogy I use, if you've been watching my mini series, is that you need to think of yourself like being on a highway. Right? So if you're on a highway, you're going from point A to point B. Let's say you're starting here, like this is where you started at jazz piano, your very first thing you learned at jazz piano. And point B, like let's say across America or something like that, most of you probably live in the United States, you're getting to the other coast. And the other coast is like the promised land. It's like you can play jazz piano however you dreamed of, however you imagine yourself playing, right? Now you're on this long journey. It takes a long time. And as we go down this highway, right, we're going to start to see billboards and things and gems and allures and cities that are going to suck us in and pull us to certain things that we want to learn and explore. That's totally fine, right? But you don't want to start to get too sucked in where you go to something else and then that brings you, like let's say you're going across the United States and then you take a little detour because you want to see the city, you want to explore it, but then that brings you to another detour. And then that brings you to another turn. And by the time you know it, you know, you've driven, you don't even know where you are, right? And so, Ed, as long as you're exploring more advanced concepts with a knowledge of the path and steps that come into play to build up to that. Like I see a lot of students jump for concepts when they don't really know what the steps are to get there. And that becomes a problem because then there's lots of holes in students' education. So for example, for voicings, someone will jump to really advanced voicings like I was just playing without going through a voicing structured path. It's okay to jump to those voicings, but just have an understanding of the concepts that lead up to that to allow you to play those voicings freely however you want, because we need to keep in mind our ultimate goal, right, is to do this in a free way and spontaneously just, lay it out on the table. So as long as you don't go too far down a rabbit hole, right, without really having an understanding of stuff, then it's totally cool. Go for it. I don't want to be like a curmudgeon here saying, oh no, you need to do this. Like my teachers did that to me. I hated it. Always start to throw in some fun stuff. You got to keep it fun. That's going to keep your motivation up. Bruce says to use where let me see, Bruce, hold on one sec. Is one concepts, will the playbooks be in some kind of order to use with the main course curriculum? Bruce, the concept of the playbooks that we're going to be releasing are actually for individuals to discern what they need more of. What more of the path do you need? And just like I was saying before with the meters, if your improvisation is struggling, but you can play really nice voicings, then you're going to need to go into the improvisation playbook. And otherwise, and vice versa, if you can play improvisation really well, but your voicings are struggling, you don't know your extensions very well, then you're going to want to go and actually pair up. There's going to be recommended pairings, kind of like wine and food, right, of these particular playbooks. All members of Jazz Piano School will get access to this, but you'll be able to pair these playbooks and pair them up with each other so you're really uplifting the lever of that particular skill ability, okay? So Bruce, the concept, the order that you're looking for is more so in the Success Path curriculum that's inside of Jazz Piano School, but this is meant for you to utilize to see the path of certain individual topics in your own playing that may need a boost, So, and don't worry, feel free to ask me any questions that you want, ask my team and I any questions that you want. Les says, hey, Brendan, you were so inspirational. Thank you very much. Learning jazz piano was so daunting until I discovered you. Awesome. England, that's so great to hear. Howard says, I've been wanting to go back to London for so long, and just England in general. I've only been there a couple times. I'd like to go more. How do you voice 1/6 and 1 minor 6 rootless, 3-5-6-9 and 6-9-3-5? 1-6. Yes, Howard. So 3-3-5-6-9. Yep, exactly. So for 6 chords, guys, for your 6 chords, your shells of the chord are going to be 3 and 6, not 3 and 7. So you can put anything else around that, like a very common rootless voicing for a 6 chord is 1. All you're doing is changing your major 7. Here's the bass note. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. So here's your 6 chord, 3-5-6-9, right? Here's your major 7. So all you're doing is switching your 7 to the 6, and that creates your major 6. It's going to be the same thing with your rootless minor 7. Here's your rootless minor 7 structure. You're going to switch that 7 to the 6 because the 6 is actually the other shell note in the chord now. Right, so your shells are the 3rd and 7 of 7th chords, but for 6 chords, your shells are the 3rd and 6. So now we have this. And then the flip-flop version of that, instead of this, right, Howard, you'd have this. And check it out. What is this? This is just a dominant F7 dominant rootless voicing, but played over a C. It's actually a C6, C minor 6 voicing. What are your favorite enclosures that you use in your play? I'm practicing it now. I've discovered there are plenty of these structures, but I have some favorites. Yeah, I love the ones. I love the ones I was playing before. The double chromatic up front. That's a really cool one. Again, I learned from Oscar. He uses those all the times, but I really don't have. I wouldn't say I have favorites. That would be my favorite if I had to list one. Right, any of those kind of doubles that are happening around a chord tone, so you're getting that full circle that's going around. And again, if you start to like if you're going to the root of B flat, it's a really cool, that's my favorite one, I would say, Alex. Yeah. Great question about the 6 chords. I'd love to see a video about how to use them, or maybe there's one out there already. I probably don't have a video on 6 chords, I don't think, but there probably should be one. We can do that for sure. So anyway, guys, to wrap up this particular lesson here, I got a lot of more work I got to do to prep for the release next week. And again, if you're not a member of Jazz Piano School, I highly recommend getting on our email list, because we are releasing these brand new playbooks, and Black Friday is around the corner, and obviously we get involved with that. But if you're not on the email list, go to jazzpianoschool.com/Black Friday 2021, or you can get the blueprint, which is a really, really great free resource by going to jazzpianoschool.com/blueprint. All members have access to that already, so you guys don't need to do that. But today was all about practicing concepts, learning your concepts, right? So you can kind of pull the music away, practice your concepts without music, and really understand them so that they start to flow through you into your playing. The next live stream is going to be Saturday, I think at 10:30, and that's going to be all about improvisation. Now, I don't just mean improvisation like right-hand lines. I mean improvisation as the definition states, meaning a spontaneous act of utilization. This is my second portion, is my definition. Spontaneous act of utilization of a tool, of a jazz concept. So when we improvise, it's not just our right hand. We improvise things like what voicing to use. That, our choice there, that spontaneous decision is the art of improvisation, right? So I want you to kind of change your mindset around improvisation. It's just your right hand lines and stuff like that. But improvisation can be how we act in the moment, what decisions we make, how we choose bass notes, voicings, lines, obviously, comps, all that stuff. How do we take a tool and learn how to spontaneously use it in our playing so it's coming out naturally, and it does serve now as an option for us without having to think, right? Without having to think about it, I can just, boom, I can use whatever I want in a spontaneous action, in an improvised action, right? That's what Saturday is going to be about. So I'd love to see you guys all there on Saturday morning, and then I will do one more on Monday morning, and then I'll be flying to Boston to go see my family, and it'll be Thanksgiving. Playbooks released on Friday for all members, Black Friday, and everything else actually within Jazz Piano School will be available for Black Friday to get involved with as well if you're not a member. Okay? Hope you guys have a great day, and I'm going to throw this thing up. And as always, happy practicing.